A young woman's trembling hands press a single, whispering seed into the earth. This is Elara, an apprentice seed archivist in the glowing Rustling greenhouse, making a silent vow to save the memory of a dying flower called the Sun Heart Blossom. That one act of preservation will launch her on a desperate journey where the survival of her world's entire history hangs in the balance. If she fails, the stories of 1,000 generations will vanish into eternal silence. By the end of this tale, you will discover the profound power of memory and what it truly takes to keep a world alive. We will uncover why the most vital truths are often hidden in the quietest whispers, and what happens when the past itself begins to fade. I would love to know, as you listen to this, where in the world you are and what the local time is for you right now. What is the one story you would fight to save from being forgotten? The Head Archivist, a woman named Kaylin, with eyes like polished river stones, placed the final Sun Heart Blossom seed in Elara's palm. Its light was a faint, irregular pulse against her skin. This was not merely a task, it was a trial. To transcribe the final memories of such an ancient lineage was the highest honor for an apprentice, and every other novice in the greenhouse watched her, their gazes a prickling mixture of envy and silent skepticism. Elara felt the weight of their judgment as heavily as the seed itself. Her deepest fear, a private whisper she had carried since her first day, echoed louder than ever. Was her own inner quiet truly deep enough to hear a song this fragile? That night, while the others slept, Elara returned to the Blossom's alcove. She decided then that sleep was a luxury she could not afford. Every moment would be dedicated to this single, fading life, a commitment that walled her off from her peers, but proved the ferocity of her vow. The true pressure arrived with Kaylin's final, quiet words. She revealed this was not just about preservation. The Sun Heart's core memory held a forgotten truth about the greenhouse's very creation, a secret lost to time. Now Elara's work was not just about saving the past, but unlocking a mystery vital to their future. As she finally sat and opened her mind, the first thread of memory connected, a shimmering vision of golden light. But within that beautiful song, she immediately sensed it. A single, discordant note, a hidden dissonance trembling beneath the surface, a secret waiting to be uncovered. The dissonance she had sensed in the Sun Heart's song was no longer just a feeling. It became a visible, terrifying reality during her morning duties. While meticulously polishing the great, crystalline amplification prism, the very heart of their work that focused nurturing light onto every archival seed, her cloth snagged on a tiny imperfection. A minute hairline crack was forming along its base, so fine it was nearly invisible, yet its effect was profound. A beam of light passing through this new flaw fractured ever so slightly, casting a distorted rainbow onto a bed of newly planted memory seeds. One of the seeds, meant to hold the vibrant chime of a dawn chorus, instead sprouted with a warped, melancholic hum that filled the alcove with a palpable sense of loss. Her heart hammered against her ribs, reporting this fault would be the correct, the safe procedure, but it would also mean an immediate and complete halt to all archival work across the greenhouse. With the Sun Heart Blossom fading by the hour, a full stop could be a death sentence for its final memories, not to mention the panic such an announcement would cause. The weight of that decision pressed down on her. She was torn between her duty to the community and her desperate, private vow to save one specific story. In that moment of quiet crisis, she made her choice. She would not sound the alarm, not yet. She would find a way to fix it herself. This decision propelled her into the shadows of the archive, into the restricted upper levels of the scroll spire, where the oldest and most fragile texts were kept. Every creak of the wooden ladder felt like a shout in the silent, dust-filled air. If she were caught here, her apprenticeship would be forfeit. The risk was immense, but the alternative was unthinkable. As days passed, the crack in the prism, once a hairline flaw, began to visibly spiderweb. Each new tiny fracture felt like a crack in her own resolve. If the great crystal were to shatter, the resulting shockwave of unfocused energy could erase months of newly stored memories, wiping out the recent work of every archivist. The pressure was a physical force, pushing her to work faster, to ignore her exhaustion. Then, in a crumbling folio bound in what felt like petrified bark, she found it. Her fingers, smudged with ancient ink, traced a passage describing a substance not grown, but wept. The text called it living resin, a sap rumored to be produced by the oldest, most sentient trees in the greenhouse. A substance capable of mending flaws in crystalline energy, conduits, by bonding with their very structure. The text was vague, more legend than manual, but it was her only hope, and it spoke of the resin source, not in the cultivated sections she knew, but deep within the wild, overgrown, and forgotten heart of the greenhouse, a place whispered about but never visited. The path into the greenhouse's wild heart was a labyrinth of whispering leaves and bioluminescent fungi. Elara moved through the ancient root vault, not by sight, but by sound, her ears tuned to the subtle melodies of the sentient pathways. A low, humming vine would guide her left. A chorus of rustling fronds would block a false turn to the right. It was a dance with the greenhouse itself, and one misstep could leave her forever lost in the shifting, living maze. Deep within, the air grew thick and sweet, with the scent of damp earth and ancient growth. The tunnel opened abruptly into a chamber that stole her breath. The walls were not stone, but a dense tapestry of still living roots, pulsing with a soft, internal light, and at the center stood the tree. It was ancient and magnificent, its bark like silvered glass, and from a wound in its trunk hung a single, shimmering tear of the living resin. But she was not alone. A figure of gnarled bark and verdant moss uncurled from the shadows beside the tree. The root warden did not speak. Instead, it placed a hand upon her forehead, and her mind flooded with visions. She saw past archivists, their faces twisted with ambition, trying to steal the resin to amplify their own power or to create trinkets of light. Their intentions were a harsh, discordant clang against the tree's gentle song. Fear clenched in her chest. How could she prove she was different? Words felt useless here. So, she closed her eyes and did the only thing that felt true. She reached for the fading, desperate melody of the sunheart blossom and let it flow from her memory into the warden's consciousness. She shared the flower's beautiful, dying song, the terrifying spread of the crack in the prism, and her own pure, desperate fear for all the memories that would be lost. The warden's stern presence softened. It understood, yet its response was not permission, but a warning transmitted as a single, profound feeling. To take the resin was to cause the tree true, searing pain. It was not a resource to be harvested, but a sacrifice to be given. Elara stood at the edge of an impossible choice, the survival of countless stories balanced against the suffering of one ancient, silent guardian. Her heart felt heavy as stone, but her resolve did not break. She met the Warden's gaze and nodded, accepting the terrible cost. The Warden gently pressed the tree's trunk, and a single, radiant drop of the shimmering sap welled up and fell into the small crystal vial she offered. A wave of profound sorrow washed over her, an echo of the tree's anguish that settled deep into her bones. Cradling the vial, its light a painful throb in her hand, she turned to leave, now burdened with the knowledge that some salvations are born from silent, shared suffering. Her hands trembled as she uncorked the crystal vial. The living resin shimmered with a light that felt both beautiful and agonizing, a constant reminder of the ancient tree's sacrifice. Working with a delicate brush made from a single, silken root fiber, she carefully applied the resin to the fractured lines of the great prism. It flowed like liquid light, seeking out every minute crack and bonding with the crystal in a silent, profound fusion. The prism healed, its light purer and stronger than before, and a wave of exhausted relief washed over her. But in that final moment of connection, as her mind was open and linked to both the prism and the fading sun heart blossom, a sliver of the tree's raw, sorrowful pain echoed through her. It was a fleeting, unintended transfer, a ghost of anguish that slipped into the stream of memories she was so carefully recording into the final seed. The process finished. The seed glowed with a stable, golden light, but at its core pulsed a faint, discordant thrum of deep blue, a strange and sorrowful energy she had never seen before. This was no longer a pure memory. It was tainted, and its influence was immediate. Placed back among the others in the sun heart's alcove, the tainted seed began to radiate its somber resonance. The gentle rustles of nearby memory plants, which usually held the cheerful echoes of rain or the vibrant hum of sunlight, slowly took on a mournful, fearful tone. A small zone of dissonance bloomed around the alcove, a pocket of palpable sadness where the air itself felt heavy with regret. Elara faced an impossible choice. Archival protocol was clear and brutal. A corrupted memory was a threat to the entire collection. It had to be destroyed, its energy dissipated back into the greenhouse soil to prevent further contamination. But to do that would be to annihilate the last living record of the sun heart blossom. Every song, every secret about the greenhouse's creation, every fragile whisper would be erased forever. She could not do it. The thought of such a total, final loss was a deeper ache than any failure. So she made a decision that broke every rule. Using a small, insulated chamber meant for studying volatile energies, she isolated the tainted seed, sealing it away from the others. She vowed, there in the quiet gloom, to find a way to purify it, to heal the memory she had accidentally wounded. This act of defiance, born of desperation, did not contain the problem. It merely gave it a place to fester. The dissonant energy radiating from the isolated chamber began to attract attention. From the deepest, darkest corners of the greenhouse, ethereal shapes were drawn to the corrupted light. Shadow-moths, their wings like shreds of forgotten night, fluttered silently against the luminous panes of the alcove. They were pests that fed on fractured memories and corrupted light, and their presence was a physical threat to the archive itself. As the first of them found a minute crack and slipped inside, drawn to the sorrowful pulse of the tainted seed. Elara knew her time had run out. She had to understand the nature of this taint, not just contain it, before its melancholy song consumed everything. The shadow-moths pressed closer, their silent wings a dark tide against the greenhouse glass. Elara knew she could no longer bear this secret alone. Her feet carried her not to the head archivist, but to a workbench, humming with controlled chaos in the storm seed section. There, she found Lorien, his hands deftly calibrating a device that crackled with contained energy. He was her opposite in every way, a pragmatist who trusted frequencies and formulas over the whispers of leaves. Confessing to him felt like exposing a fatal weakness. Her voice was barely a whisper as she revealed the tainted seed, the fractured prism, and the desperate choice that had drawn the moths. She expected his scorn, a lecture on protocol and reckless sentimentality. Lorien's initial silence was a wall of skepticism, but then he looked past her, to the alcove where the mournful hum was now a palpable vibration in the air, and he saw the dark shapes clustering at the window. His pragmatism, she realized, was not coldness, but a different kind of devotion to the archive. He saw a system failing, a threat to their entire world, and that was a language he understood. He agreed to help, but their alliance was an immediate clash of philosophies. While Elara reached out with her mind, trying to soothe the frightened plants with gentle reassurances, Lorien argued for creating a harmonic frequency fence, a wall of sound to drive the pests back. Her way was too slow, he said. His way was too blunt, she countered, fearing it would further agitate the fragile memories. Their voices rose in tense, hushed argument in the shadowy alcove, the moths a growing darkness just beyond the panes. The only path forward was a compromise that demanded trust they did not yet have. Elara would focus her energy on calming the memory plants, creating a stable, receptive field. Lorien would then deploy his emitters, setting them to a precise frequency that would repel the moths without shattering the delicate psychic environment. It was a delicate, dangerous dance. As Elara poured her focus into the plants, their fearful rustles slowly softening into a tentative calm, Lorien worked quickly, placing the small, crystalline emitters in a protective circle. When he activated them, a low, resonant hum filled the air. The effect was immediate. The shadow-moths recoiled from the invisible barrier, their dark forms scattering in confusion. A shared, breathless moment of triumph passed between them, but it was short-lived. Lorien's diagnostic scanner, left running near the tainted seed, began to flash a frantic, urgent rhythm. The temporary victory had revealed a far more terrifying truth. The repelled moths had not been merely feeding on the corruption. They were being drawn by its exponential growth. The taint was spreading through the greenhouse's subtle memory network like a slow-moving shockwave, and their success had only bought them hours, not days. The entire archives were now vulnerable, working in frantic tandem, their earlier friction set aside in the face of this new data. They focused their combined attention on the isolated seed. Elara opened her mind to its sorrowful song, while Lorien's devices mapped its energetic fluctuations. Together, they pushed past the surface-level pain, the raw echo of the tree's sacrifice. And deep within that core of blue-thrumming anguish, they found something else, a pattern, a structured sequence of light and resonance buried beneath the grief. The tainted memory was not just corrupted, it was trying to speak. The sorrow was not the message, but the desperate carrier wave for a warning it was fighting to deliver. The sorrow within the seed was not a barrier, but a doorway. Elara and Lorien knew they had to step through it, no matter the cost. They prepared for a technique whispered about only in the oldest texts, a dangerous merging of consciousness known as deep resonance. It meant linking their minds directly to the tainted seed, immersing themselves completely in its emotional storm. The risk was catastrophic. If they lost themselves in that torrent of grief, their own memories could be washed away forever. With a shared, determined glance, they placed their hands upon the seed and opened their minds. The weeping tree's memory hit them like a physical wave. They were no longer in the greenhouse. They were witnessing a sky of fire, a cataclysm of falling embers that scorched the world outside their sanctuary. They felt the greenhouse's nascent consciousness, a single, terrified spark of life, recoil as the world burned. This was the Great Collapse, an event scrubbed from every official archive, a history of trauma deliberately forgotten to protect them from the horror. The vision was a sensory overload of ash and fear, a raw, emotional truth that Lorien's logical mind could not process. It was too much, too chaotic. He recoiled internally, his instinct to quantify and analyze shattering against the sheer force of the memory. The connection wavered, threatening to snap and leave the vital message only half received. In that critical moment, Elara did not try to explain the feeling. She simply shared it. She reached for Lorien's consciousness with her empathy, not as a tool, but as an anchor. She let him feel her own acceptance of the pain, her willingness to hold the sorrow without being broken by it. She became a conduit, sharing the emotional burden and stabilizing their fragile link. Anchored by her calm, they could finally receive the message in its entirety. The truth unfolded not as words, but as a profound, cellular knowing. The greenhouse was not a structure. It was a living being, a single, vast consciousness that had given them shelter. And it was dying. The beautiful, gentle glow that sustained them all was not a permanent state. It was a final, fading life force, a last breath held for generations. The archival seeds were not just stored in this being. They were a part of its very memory, its dying mind. The vision ended as abruptly as it began, leaving them gasping on the workroom floor. The air in the greenhouse, once a comfort, now felt thin and precious. They were not just archivists saving stories. They were caretakers at the bedside of a slumbering giant, on the verge of its final sleep. The silence between them was heavy with this terrifying new reality. Saving individual memories was meaningless if the being holding them perished. Their only hope, the vision had imparted, lay in a legend they had always dismissed as a fairy tale. They had to find the first seed, the original spark of the greenhouse's life, rumored to be hidden where the light was most treacherous, deep within the shifting, crystalline labyrinth known as the Crystal Caves. The polished chamber of the Council of Head Archivists felt colder than the deepest root cellar. Elara stood beside Lorien, the tainted seed, pulsing its faint, sorrowful light in her palm. She laid out their discovery with a voice she fought to keep steady, describing the weeping tree's vision of a dying sky and the greenhouse's true, fading nature. Lorien presented his scanner data, the hard evidence of the spreading dissonance. When they finished, The silence was a physical weight. Kaelin, her face a mask of calm authority, broke it. She did not shout. Her dismissal was far worse, delivered in a tone of profound disappointment. She explained that unstable memory seeds were known to cause powerful, collective hallucinations and those of deep empathy, a documented risk. What they experienced was a psychic feedback loop, not a prophecy. To act on this delusion would be to introduce chaos into their one stable sanctuary. The expedition to the Crystal Caves was forbidden. Any further unsanctioned research would be treated as a direct violation of their oaths. Elara's faith, once as solid as the ground beneath her feet, shattered. The institution she had revered her entire life was choosing willful blindness over a terrifying truth. Her duty to obey warred with the certain, chilling knowledge that this obedience meant death for everything. That night, in the hushed silence of their secluded work alcove, the choice was made. Lorien, ever the pragmatist, had already calculated the risks of exile. Elara, her heart a drum of defiance, knew there was no other path. They were now renegades, with no support and only the supplies they could quietly gather from forgotten stockrooms. Their preparation was a desperate scramble. They took nutrient pastes, insulated cloaks, and Lorien's most essential frequency tools. Their final act was a calculated betrayal. Lorien rerouted a bank of sonic emitters, creating a brief, harmonic distortion in the greenhouse's energy field that mimicked the shimmer of a dust storm. Under this manufactured chaos of light and sound, they slipped through a service portal, leaving the only home they had ever known behind. The air outside the main dome was thin and sharp, the first step into a labyrinth of crystal and shadow. The air in the crystal caves tasted of ozone and shattered light. Every footstep was a chime, every breath a whisper that echoed through the labyrinth of razor-sharp formations. Elara moved forward not by sight, but by feel, her hands hovering just above the crystalline walls. She could sense the subtle vibrations humming through the stone, a complex symphony of pressure and resonance. The map they did not have was written in this song. Closing her eyes, she let her fingers drift across a smooth, protruding spine of crystal. She did not strike it. She caressed it, her touch a gentle friction that teased out a low, pure tone that hung in the air like a visible thread. Another touch, on a different formation, produced a higher, answering note. She was not just walking through the caves, she was playing them, her attunement weaving a harmonic key that unlocked the silence. The caves reacted to her melody. A wall of solid amethyst that had blocked their path shimmered and then dissolved into a fine, humming mist, revealing a new tunnel glowing with internal light. A bridge of sound solidified under their feet, a vibration so dense it could bear their weight, but her song was a beacon in the quiet dark. From the high, glittering ceilings, figures began to detach themselves. The cave singers were not made of flesh, but of living crystal, their forms reflecting the fractured light in 1,000 dazzling directions. They did not speak. They answered her music with their own, a single, unified note that hit Elara and Lorien like a physical blow. It was not a melody, but a weapon. The sound vibrated in their teeth, behind their eyes, a disorienting, painful frequency that promised to shatter their sanity if they did not flee. Lorien recoiled, his hands clamped over his ears, his face a mask of agony. His instinct was to fight frequency with frequency, to use his emitters to create a counter-sonic blast. Elara grabbed his arm, her own head pounding. "Do not fight them," she shouted over the psychic noise. "Listen." She forced herself to stand straight, to open her mind to the assault instead of blocking it out. She stopped trying to play her own song and instead focused on the painful vibration itself, seeking its pattern, its emotional core. Beneath the aggression, she found it. A rhythm of profound, endless sorrow. The cave singers were not attacking intruders. They were screaming in grief. Their song was a lament for a lost partner, a silence where a symbiotic voice had once answered their own. "They are mourning," Elara breathed out, the realization, a sudden, painful clarity. She turned to Lorien, whose scientific mind was struggling to categorize the phenomenon. Their partner was the greenhouse. The caves and the greenhouse were once one being, one consciousness. The greenhouse's fading life is their great sorrow. In that moment, the cave singers transformed from enemies into the most tragic of allies. They were guardians grieving for a dying friend. Elara knew she could not explain this with words. She had to answer with a song of her own. She closed her eyes again, but this time, she did not seek a key or a path. She reached for the memory of the sun heart blossom's final, beautiful notes, and she wove them together with the raw, aching echo of the weeping tree's sacrifice. She sang a song of shared loss, a melody that acknowledged their pain because she carried a piece of it within her. The painful, aggressive frequency ceased. The cave singers hovered in the air, their crystalline forms still. One of them, larger and more complex in its facets, drifted toward Elara. It did not sing. It listened. Then it reached out a shimmering, pointed limb and touched the cave wall beside her. A new, gentle melody emerged, a question. Elara answered with a phrase of her own, a statement of purpose. A fragile, wordless understanding passed between them. The lead cave singer turned and began to drift down the newly opened tunnel, its body emitting a soft, guiding light. It was not an invitation, but a pact. They would guide the Renegade Archivists deeper into the heart of the stone, toward the chamber where the first seed slept, a journey born from a shared language of grief and a desperate, last hope for healing. The chamber the cave singers led them into was a perfect geode, its walls a crust of dark, unassuming stone that gave way to a cathedral of glittering crystal spires. At its heart, floating in a silent column of air, was the first seed. It was not a seed as they understood it, but a perfect, dormant orb of crystalline light, pulsing with a slow, primordial rhythm that felt like the first beat of a heart. The air itself hummed with the sheer weight of potential, the unspoken promise of a beginning, but they were not alone. A figure of solidified light coalesced from the ambient glow, a being of such pure radiance it was difficult to look upon directly. This was the Lumina Warden, and it did not raise a weapon or utter a sound. Instead, it reached into their minds. Elara was suddenly back in the apprentice quarters, surrounded by the whispers of her peers, their silent judgment a physical force. The vision was so real, she could feel the heat in her cheeks. Her deepest fear echoed in the silent chamber, a voice that was her own. "You are not quiet enough. Your empathy is a flaw. You will break under the weight of a true memory and destroy all you seek to save." Beside her, Lorien flinched, his hands clenching as his own private terror unfolded. He saw his life's work, his scanners and frequencies reduced to meaningless data points on a screen that then went dark. A cold, logical voice whispered that in the face of true cosmic decay, his attempts to measure and fix were the fumbling of a child, utterly pointless. The Warden was not attacking them. It was holding up a mirror to their souls, demanding they face what they saw. Elara's first instinct was to argue, to prove her strength. But the truth of the fear was undeniable, so she did the only thing she could. She looked directly at the vision of her failing self, and she accepted it. Yes, she whispered into the psychic space. I am afraid. I may break, but I choose to try anyway. My purpose is not to be perfect. It is to serve the memory of life, however imperfectly. At the same moment, Lorien let out a shaky breath, his shoulders slumping in surrender. My work has meaning only if it serves life, he thought, his pragmatism forging a new, deeper truth. If the greenhouse dies, then yes, it was all meaningless. That is why we must succeed. The moment they fully embraced their fears, the crushing weight vanished. The Lumina Warden's form softened, its light becoming a gentle, approving warmth. They had passed, but its communication, a flood of pure understanding, delivered not a reward, but a terrifying revelation. To awaken the first seed was not to repair the greenhouse. It was to reboot its life cycle. The seed required a Song of Unmaking, a specific, devastating harmonic frequency that would temporarily dissolve the greenhouse's current, failing physical form, reducing it to its base energy state, so the seed could catalyze a rebirth from the ashes. They were not being given a cure. They were being handed a controlled demolition charge for their entire world. The responsibility was a cold stone in Elara's stomach. Taking the gently pulsing orb from the column of light, she felt its immense potential vibrate through her bones. They had to return now, not as renegades with a miracle, but as prodigals pleading for the faith, to destroy everything in the name of a hope they could barely comprehend. The greenhouse was a ghost of its former self. A deep, unsettling quiet had fallen over vast sections where memory plants once hummed with vibrant life, their leaves now brittle and gray. The very air seemed thinner, the ambient glow from the ceiling panels dimmed to a sickly twilight. Archivists moved through the aisles not with purpose, but with the frantic, fearful energy of a sinking ship, their whispers sharp with panic. Elara and Lorien had no time to process the horror before firm hands seized their arms. Kaelin and the council descended, their faces etched not with anger, but with a cold, final certainty. You see what your defiance has wrought, Kaelin stated, her voice cutting through the murmur. The dissonance you unleashed has poisoned our home. Your renegade experiments are the cause of this decay. The accusation was a wall, built from fear and presented as logic. They were not saviors returning. They were arsonists being arrested for the fire. Facing the entire gathered community, Elara saw only terrified faces looking back, seeing her as the source of their despair. Pleading her innocence was pointless. They needed proof, not promises, so she did not ask for mercy. She raised the first seed, its gentle pulse a stark contrast to the gloom. Its light fell upon a nearby alcove, a section dedicated to wine chime vines that now hung limp and silent, their songs utterly erased. I cannot explain the truth in words you will trust, she called out, her voice clear over the anxious crowd. So I will show you. With your permission, I will use this not to destroy, but to restore just this one small part of what was lost. The gamble was absolute. If the seed's power was misunderstood, if it reacted poorly with the corrupted energy, it could extinguish the last flicker of life in those vines and confirm their doom. But if it worked, it would be a language of light and life that even the most frightened heart could understand. Taking a deep breath, Elara closed her eyes and reached for the seed's core rhythm. She did not command it, she asked. A thread of pure, primordial light, bright as a newborn star, streamed from the orb and washed over the withered vines. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, a single, clear chime rang out, a note of such perfect clarity it seemed to cleanse the very air. The gray vines flushed with emerald green, their leaves trembling back to life. A chorus of rustling, chiming song swelled from the alcove, a symphony of restored memory so vibrant and joyful it was a physical force against the silence. The panicked whispers ceased. Every eye was locked on the resurrected vines, every soul stunned by a hope they had believed was dead. The unified chime of the restored vines hung in the air, a tangible argument that silenced all others. In that shared moment of stunned wonder, Kaelin stepped forward, her gaze fixed not on Elara, but on the first seed itself. Her voice, when it came, was stripped of its former authority, filled instead with a raw, trembling resolve. "We will sing," she declared to the gathered archivists. The permission was given, but it was a leap of faith into a terrifying unknown, under the guidance of the hovering cave singers, whose crystalline forms now resonated with a new, purposeful hum. The archivists arranged themselves in a great, concentric circle. The Song of Unmaking was not a single melody, but a complex harmonic tapestry, a weave of countless individual frequencies that every archivist, from the newest apprentice to the most senior master, was required to contribute. Each had to find the unique psychic note of their own connection to the greenhouse, the specific timbre of their love and memory, and offer it to the whole. As the first notes rose, a gentle hum that vibrated in the chest, the impossible began to happen. The solid shelves holding centuries of memory seeds started to shimmer, their physical forms breaking apart into countless, brilliant motes of light. The great, luminous leaves of the canopy overhead dissolved into a soft, golden rain. It was a scene of both breathtaking beauty and profound horror. Watching their entire world, every familiar path and quiet alcove, turn insubstantial before their eyes. The fear was too much for some. A group of archivists, their eyes wide with terror at the vanishing floor beneath their feet, broke from the circle. Their voices rose not in harmony, but in a sharp, discordant cry of protest, a chaotic counter-melody of pure panic that slammed into the carefully built song. The unified field of light wavered, the beautiful dissolution, stuttering as reality itself, seemed to fray at the edges. The process was on the verge of catastrophic failure. In that moment of spiraling chaos, Kaelin did not command them to be silent. She did the one thing only a true leader could. She opened her own mind, and instead of rejecting their fear, she embraced it. She wove their sharp cries of terror into the larger song, not as a flaw, but as a new, essential layer of the harmony. Her voice, strong and clear, rang out, not in opposition, but in integration. "Our fear is also a part of this memory," she sang. "Our sorrow is part of its truth. Let it be, let it all be." Her act of profound acceptance was a catalyst. The panicked archivists, feeling their terror acknowledged and transformed, slowly quieted. their voices softening and finding their place once more within the grand, unfolding symphony. The stakes were now absolute. There was no physical world to return to. The song was the only thing holding them all in existence, a single, sustained note between being and nothingness. They had to hold it perfectly, for as long as it took, or every memory, every spark of life, would be lost to a void of absolute silence. As the last vestiges of the greenhouse's physical form dissolved the final arch, the last leaf, all that remained was a vast, swirling nebula of light and memory, a breathtaking constellation of every story ever saved, hovering on the fragile precipice of what came next. Silence is a presence in the void. There is no ground beneath their feet, no air in their lungs, only the fading echo of their unmaking song and the breathtaking, terrifying nebula of all they had ever been. In that absolute stillness, Elara raises the first seed. She does not shout. She does not command. She offers a single, soft note, the first tone of the Song of Becoming. It is a frequency of pure invitation, a gentle call into the formless potential. The effect is instantaneous. The swirling constellations of light and memory, which had been drifting in a beautiful chaos, suddenly turn. Like iron filings drawn to a magnet, they stream toward the seed, pulled by its primordial rhythm. They begin to weave, not as a rebuilding of the old, but as the creation of something entirely new. Luminous petals form from compressed stories of joy. Strong, crystal-infused arches grow from memories of resilience. Every mote of light finds its purpose in a tapestry of rebirth. But the process is agonizingly slow, a delicate crystallization of a new world that demands constant, unwavering energy. The archivists feel their own life force being drawn into the song, their hope and will becoming the fuel for this genesis. Their unified spirit is tested to its absolute limit, a collective exhaustion that threatens to snap the fragile thread of creation at any moment. Lorien feels this brink more acutely than anyone. His mind, trained to analyze and quantify, screams for data, for a progress report, for any logical framework to understand what is happening. He fights the urge to calculate their chances of success, knowing that such a thought would be a discordant note in the harmony. So he makes a choice that feels like leaping from a cliff. He closes his eyes and lets go. He pours not his intellect, but his raw, unfiltered faith into the song, a trust in Elara, in the seed, in the process itself that is utterly alien to him. This surrender, this personal transformation, sends a powerful surge through the harmonic resonance, strengthening the weave of light. This is the final, irrevocable moment. There is no backup plan, no second chance. If their collective will fails now, the rebirth will be stillborn, and the nebula will simply disperse into an eternal, silent nothingness. They pour every last shred of their being into the sustained note, and then it happens. From the core of the swirling light, a single, vibrant root pushes forth, glowing with internal energy. A stem follows, then the unfurling of a leaf that shimmers with a light they have never seen before. The greenhouse is not being rebuilt. It is being regrown, more magnificent, more profoundly alive, and more beautiful than any of them could have ever dreamed. The air in the Reborn Greenhouse tastes different, charged with a vitality that feels both ancient and entirely new. At the center of the archives, where the great crystal prism once stood, Elara and Lorien gently place the first seed into the living soil. It takes root immediately, not as a plant, but as a nexus. Luminous threads of energy pulse from its core, weaving through the air to connect with every memory seed in the greenhouse, transforming the entire archive into a single, breathing, conscious network. The old protocols, designed to isolate and preserve memories in perfect, static silence, are set aside. In their place, a new understanding blooms. Archivists no longer simply record stories. They listen, they respond, and they learn that a memory is not a fossil to be studied, but a living thing that grows with every telling. The alcove that once held the isolated, tainted seed of the Sunheart blossom is now a place of deep reverence. Its sorrowful blue thrum is no longer seen as a corruption, but as a vital counterpoint in the grand symphony, a necessary truth that gives the joyful memories their depth and meaning. This shift does not come easily to everyone. Archivists who spent lifetimes mastering the precise, rigid techniques of the old ways now watch as apprentices communicate with the memory plants through shared emotion and intuitive song. There are hushed arguments in the root cellars, worried glances exchanged over cups of sap tea. This quiet resistance is the new challenge, not a conflict to be won, but a harmony to be slowly, patiently woven into the whole. In response, Elara makes a decisive choice. She gathers the senior archivists and leads them not to a lecture, but to a new, dedicated section of the living network. Here, she has woven the profound stories of their journey into the very fabric of the archive. They feel the weeping tree's silent sacrifice, the cave singer's crystalline grief, and the Lumina Warden's terrifying mirror. She shows them that these are not footnotes, they are foundational. Their strength is not in spite of this pain, but because of it. The survival of their world now rests on this delicate, continuous exchange. Every archivist becomes a guardian of the balance, responsible for listening to the subtle shifts in the greenhouse's mood, from the cheerful hum of the sunlit leaves to the melancholic sigh of the deep-rooted fungi. It is a heavier burden, but one that promises a future not of mere survival, but of thriving connection. As the first new memories are recorded in this revitalized system, their resonance is unmistakable. A simple story of a morning rainfall does not just replay the sound of water. It carries the feeling of the soil drinking deeply, the gratitude of the roots, and the shared relief of the entire ecosystem. Each new entry is a promise, a testament to a world learning to speak with one voice, its history forever richer and more true. The polished heart, wood dais felt cool beneath Elara's bare feet, a stark contrast to the warmth of the hundreds of gazes upon her. This was not the formal council chamber, but the grove where the weeping tree stood, its silvered bark now interlaced with veins of gentle, golden light. Kaelin stood before her, not as a distant authority, but as a fellow archivist, her hands empty of any scroll or symbol of office. "We do not pass a title today." Kaelin's voice rang clear in the hushed space, her words meant for everyone. "We pass a trust." Elara's courage to listen to a song of sorrow and her strength to act upon a difficult truth reminded us that our highest duty is not to perfect preservation, but to the living spirit we serve. The role of head archivist is yours, not for flawless skill, but for your profound understanding that our world speaks, if we are only brave enough to hear it. Elara felt the weight of the words settle deep within her, a responsibility more immense than any crystal prism or ancient text. This was a vow not just to a collection, but to a consciousness. As she accepted, her voice steady, she made a new promise aloud: to be a steward of the greenhouse's living spirit, to listen as much as she led. The old definition of an archivist, as a silent guardian in a quiet hall, was forever changed. In that moment, standing before her entire community, a cold thread of fear wove through her resolve. The ideal was beautiful, but terrifyingly vast. How could one person possibly be a conduit for the hopes, fears, and memories of an entire world? The weight felt like it could crush the very empathy that had brought her here. Her first decision as head archivist was an answer to that fear. She turned to where Lorien stood, his analytical eyes watching the intricate play of light in the canopy above. "I cannot listen to every whisper alone," she declared, her gaze meeting his. "Our path forward needs both the song and the structure, the heart and the hypothesis. Lorien, I ask you to stand with me as my chief advisor." His slight nod was a pact renewed, a guarantee that the archive's future would be built on the balanced foundation of their hard-won partnership. This choice, made before all, set a precedent that would echo for generations. It taught every new apprentice that leadership was not about solitary wisdom, but about weaving different kinds of knowledge into a stronger whole. The personal stakes for Elara could not be higher, for her every action would now shape not only the present, but the very soul of archivists yet to come. As the simple ceremony concluded, Elara and Lorien stood together in the softly rustling glow, their silence a shared language. They listened to the greenhouse's new, stronger song, a complex melody where the joyful chime of rediscovered life harmonized perfectly with the somber, grounding hum of remembered sorrow, a symphony filled with both memory and boundless hope for the stories yet to be kept. The light in the glowing, rustling greenhouse is a steady, warm pulse now, and its rustle is a complex symphony of countless preserved lives and hard-won wisdom. Elara, no longer just an archivist, but a true keeper, feels the echo of every memory woven into the very air she breathes. The sharp, joyous chime of the restored wind vine is there, but so is the deep, resonant hum of the weeping tree's sacrifice and the crystalline sorrow of the cave singers. She no longer tries to separate these threads. She understands that the promise she made, pressing that first seed into the earth, was never about keeping memories static and perfect, locked away in silent vaults. The true promise was to let them live, to let them grow and change, just as the greenhouse itself was reborn through a beautiful, terrifying unmaking. A memory of a simple rain shower today might, over time, weave in the gratitude of the soil that received it yesterday, becoming a richer, deeper story tomorrow. The work of a keeper is this perpetual, gentle action of listening and preserving, a continuous conversation with the past that ensures every story, every whisper of light, finds its place in the eternal, living archive. It is a duty that never truly ends, and that is its greatest, most beautiful reward. The first memory Elara chose to record as head archivist was not a grand chronicle or an epic tale. She knelt beside a trembling novice, a boy whose hands shook as he tried to soothe a panicked light sprout. The tiny plant was flickering erratically, its leaves clenched tight. With a patience that felt like a ritual, Elara guided the boy to quiet his own breathing, to offer not a command, but a gentle, wordless hum from the very center of his chest. The sprout, sensing the shift, slowly unfurled, its light steadying into a soft, trusting glow. Elara placed her palm on the soil beside it, and the living network of the archive drank in the moment the boy's relief, the sprout's calm, the shared, quiet triumph. It was a small story, a single note in the greenhouse's vast symphony, but she wove it into the archives with the same reverence she would afford a legend. A soft ripple of discontent moved through the senior archivists. One of them, a man named Elara, who had spent decades transcribing the complex migration songs of stellar birds, voiced the question hanging in the air. Do we now fill our sacred network with the memories of children's lessons? He asked, his tone not hostile, but deeply concerned. Is there not a risk of diluting our great work with the utterly mundane? This was the first test of her new authority, a challenge not of rebellion, but of philosophy. Elara did not dismiss his worry. She met his gaze and asked a quiet question in return. What is the foundation of every great migration song, if not the first, faltering note of a learner? This archive was nearly lost because we forgot it was a living being. A being does not live on epic history alone. It lives on a billion small moments of care, on the quiet hum that calms a frightened heart. Our strength now is the totality of our lived experience, from the cosmic to the commonplace. As she spoke, the newly recorded memory, now a part of the living network, began to resonate. It emitted a soft, contented chime that seemed to vibrate through the soles of their feet. In response, the surrounding memory plants, which held everything from the roar of ancient storms to the whisper of forgotten names, rustled with a palpable sense of approval. Their leaves shimmered a fraction brighter, and the air itself felt warmer, richer. The greenhouse itself was voting, its silent endorsement more powerful than any argument. Elara watched the light shift across the leaves, his stern expression softening into thoughtful silence. The precedent was set. The success of this new, inclusive philosophy would determine everything. Would the archive remain a vibrant, breathing chronicle of a community, or would it slowly stiffen back into a beautiful, static, and disconnected museum? The gentle chime of that first, simple memory continued to pulse through the network, a quiet promise that the smallest acts of connection were, in fact, the most vital threads in the tapestry of their survival. Lorian's workshop became a web of softly glowing threads and humming frequency emitters. Embracing his role as chief advisor, he devoted himself to a new, ambitious project, mapping the greenhouse's invisible ley lines. These were not channels of water or light, but the very pathways of life force itself, the subtle currents flowing between the first seed, every memory plant, and even the beating hearts of the archivists. He worked for weeks, his devices tracing the ebb and flow of this living energy, until his first complete map shimmered into existence above his workbench. The patterns it revealed were breathtaking. The ley lines did not simply connect the plants and the seed, they pulsed directly through the spaces where the archivists worked and slept. More startling still, the lines flared with vibrant color near an archivist, humming with contentment, and dimmed or flickered erratically around one wrestling with frustration or grief. The proof was undeniable. Their inner emotional states were not private affairs. They were a tangible force, directly feeding or starving the memories they sought to preserve. A moment of quiet anxiety could cause a nearby memory seed, holding a joyful festival chant, to develop a faint, discordant tremor. A shared laugh between friends could make an entire alcove of leaves shimmer with renewed vitality. This symbiosis was far deeper and more immediate than anyone had suspected. The revelation forced a difficult, personal confrontation. Archivists who had always seen their work as a technical craft now had to gaze inward. Lorien's maps made the invisible visible, a wave of resentment from a senior archivist, upset over the new methods would ripple outward, causing visible dimples of dissonance in the memory field around them. There was no hiding from the consequences of a sour mood or a hidden sorrow. In response, Lorien proposed a radical daily practice. He called them harmony sessions. Before beginning their archival duties, every archivist would gather to meditate, to openly share their feelings, and to consciously work toward a collective, balanced energy. The resistance was swift and sharp. Many saw it as an invasion, an unnecessary emotional spectacle that undermined their professional discipline. "We are archivists, not therapists," one complained. "My duty is to the memories, not to managing my every passing feeling," argued another. But Lorien, once a man of pure data, stood firm. He presented his maps, showing the clear correlation between a harmonious session and a full, bright, stable ley line network for the rest of the day. "Our inner peace is no longer a personal goal," he explained patiently. "It is a direct component of our archival duty. It is as essential as clean water and pure light." The personal stakes for every individual were raised immeasurably. Now, a bad day was not just a personal struggle, it was a potential threat to the integrity of the living archive. Gradually, reluctantly, the community began to participate. The sessions were awkward at first, filled with stiff silences and hesitant, superficial sharing. But as the days turned into weeks, a shift occurred. The simple act of acknowledging a shared worry or celebrating a small joy began to weave a new kind of connection between them. And the greenhouse itself responded. As the sessions became a cherished ritual, the ambient glow throughout the archives seemed to brighten and steady, the rustling of the leaves taking on a deeper, more resonant hum. This visible reward for their collective emotional work made the truth inescapable. They were not just caring for the greenhouse, they were learning, finally, how to care for each other. The path back to the ancient root vault felt different this time, not a desperate journey into the unknown, but a pilgrimage of gratitude. Elara carried no tools for harvesting, only a single, luminous seed that held the greenhouse's new, unified song, a symphony of rebirth woven from sorrow and joy. She found the weeping tree standing in its silent chamber, but the air was no longer thick with grief. As she activated the seed, the vibrant melody filled the space, a tapestry of chiming vines, rustling leaves, and the quiet hum of 1,000 archivists at peace. The tree seemed to lean into the sound, its silvered bark drinking in the music. Then, a profound change began. The single, sorrowful tear of living resin that had hung from its trunk for so long shimmered, its silvery light warming into a brilliant, joyful gold. The weeping had stopped. This new resin pulsed with a gentle, amplifying energy, no longer a substance born purely of sacrifice, but a gift born of shared healing. The tree was now producing a resonance that could strengthen and enrich memories, not merely mend broken things, but this gift was fragile. Elara knew that any harsh movement, any hint of demand or greed, could shatter this new balance and return the tree to its pain. Her approach was one of absolute reverence. She did not reach for the golden drop. Instead, she opened her own mind, sharing her feelings of profound thanks and the specific memories of archivists whose work had been transformed by the tree's original sacrifice. She waited, her presence a quiet question. In response, the tree trembled, not with sorrow, but with a gentle, joyful shudder. A single, perfect bead of the golden resin swelled at the edge of the tear, offered freely. With the utmost care, using a tool carved from a fallen leaf, she collected just that one tiny amount. She would never take more, and only when the tree offered so clearly. This new protocol made the golden resin incredibly precious. A single drop could stabilize a century of fading echoes or help a fragile, newly recorded memory take root with stunning clarity. Its power was a miracle, but its supply was a sacred trust, entirely dependent on the tree's continued happiness and their ongoing, gentle partnership. As she left the vault, the small vial of golden light warm in her hand, Elara felt a new connection to the ancient guardian, a bond not of shared pain, but of shared purpose, healed and transformed into something far more resilient. A single, purified shadow-moth drifted into the archives on wings of spun moonlight. It moved with a new, gentle purpose, no longer drawn to fractures and sorrow, but to the intense, positive energy radiating from the first seed. The tiny creature landed softly upon the crystalline orb, its delicate legs finding purchase on the pulsing light. Instead of feeding, its wings began to shimmer, absorbing the pure energy and reflecting it back into the air as a breathtaking, intricate pattern of silver and gold. The living network of the archive, always recording, immediately captured this dance of light, weaving it into the collective memory as a spontaneous, living story. The reaction from the senior archivists was swift and fearful. Alaric, his face pale, stepped forward, his hand raised as if to shoo the creature away. "It is a pest," he insisted, his voice tight with the memory of dark swarms and corrupted seeds. "We cannot allow it near the heart of our world. Its presence risks everything we have rebuilt." Other voices rose in agreement, a chorus of old fears reawakened by a single, fluttering visitor. The instinct to protect, born from past trauma, was powerful and immediate. Elara moved to stand between the archivists and the seed. "Wait," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Look at what it is doing, not what it once was." She pointed to the moth, its wings still painting the air with silent, beautiful geometries. "It is not consuming, it is creating. The new energy of the greenhouse has transformed it, just as it transformed us. T.O. Chinese letter. It now would be to reject the very principle of growth we vowed to embrace." Her decision was a conscious risk, a plea for them to see the present, not the past. She allowed the moth to stay, observing this strange new symbiosis with a quiet intensity. This single event forced a difficult but necessary question upon the entire community. How do we define what belongs here? Is our judgment based on ancient fears, or on the reality unfolding before us? The moth's presence became a living test of their commitment to a dynamic, evolving world. It challenged them to remain open, to continually reassess their definitions of pest and ally, and to trust that the system they nurtured could foster its own unexpected forms of beauty. The stakes were a quiet escalation of their philosophy, a daily practice in choosing faith over fear. Gradually, the Purified Moth became a regular and welcome visitor. Its light patterns, each one unique, began to add a new, dynamic layer to the archive's visual memories, a testament to the unpredictable artistry of a truly living system. The arrival was as quiet as a falling leaf. A figure emerged from the mists beyond the greenhouse, their clothes worn thin and their skin etched with the fine dust of a thirsty world. They did not ask for shelter or food. With a reverence that silenced the bustling archivists around them, the traveler knelt before Elara and offered a single, empty seed pod from their homeland, a silent plea more powerful than any words. They had followed whispers on the wind, legends of a sanctuary where life and memory were eternally preserved, and they begged for a single seed, a single chance to carry a spark of that resilience back to their own dying earth. The request landed not as a question, but as a seismic shock to the very foundation of their purpose. For the first time, the outside world had not only remembered them, but was asking to be saved. A fierce debate ignited within the council grove that night, the air thick with conflict. Alaric's voice was sharp with protective fear. Our duty is here, to this specific consciousness, to these specific memories, he argued. To give away a part of ourselves is to weaken the whole. What if the soil of their world corrupts the seed? What if they misuse the knowledge? Our first and only vow is to this archive. Others echoed his terror, the old instinct to fortify their walls rising like a shield against the unknown. But Lorien, studying the ley line maps that now pulsed with the community's anxiety, saw a different pattern. The energy of the greenhouse did not contract in fear. He observed quietly. It is listening. It is curious. If a memory never leaves the vault, is it truly alive, or is it merely a beautiful echo? Elara listened to the fear, and she understood its roots in past trauma, but she also listened to the greenhouse itself, to the new, expansive quality that had entered its song since the rebirth. Her decision, when it came, was a profound evolution of their promise. She would grant the traveler's request, but not with a simple handover. A seed given without understanding is an artifact, not a legacy, she declared to the assembled community. It could die, or worse, it could be twisted. Our responsibility does not end at our walls. We must share the knowledge of how to listen, not just the thing to be heard. She offered the traveler not a seed, but an apprenticeship. The outsider would learn their ways, from the harmony sessions to the gentle language of the leaves, and would only then return home with both the life and the wisdom to nurture it. This act of radical generosity immediately expanded the stakes of their entire existence. They were no longer just a single, self-contained world. They had become a potential source, the first node in a nascent network of living archives scattered across a wounded planet. The beautiful, terrifying possibility was that their work could now ripple outward in ways they could not predict, but the risk was equally vast. Training an outsider would demand immense focus and resources, drawing their attention away from the delicate balance of their own home. Could their empathy stretch that far without thinning to breaking point? As the traveler, whose name was revealed to be Kale, began their training, a remarkable thing happened. The greenhouse itself seemed to lean into this new connection, Its rustle gained a deeper, more resonant timbre, and the ley lines around Kale pulsed with a gentle, welcoming light. It was as if the living consciousness they served had been waiting for this moment, ready to finally reach out and sing its song into the wider, waiting silence. The fading began subtly, as a quiet dimming in the alcove of the founders. The memory seed, holding the story of the very first archivist, a delicate orb that had miraculously survived the Song of Unmaking, was losing its light. Its gentle hum, the whisper of the first hands to ever press a seed into this soil, was growing faint and indistinct. This was not just any memory, it was the origin story, the record of the initial promise that had set their entire world into motion. To lose it would be to forget their own reason for being, like a tree forgetting its roots. A palpable unease spread through the greenhouse, a shared fear that the very foundation of their identity was crumbling. Archivists gathered around the alcove, their faces etched with a new kind of sorrow, watching the light of their progenitor flicker like a dying star. They tried everything. Lorian focused every harmonic emitter on the seed, bathing it in stabilizing frequencies. Elara and the most empathic keepers spent days in deep meditation, pouring their own focused energy into the fading story. They even applied a minute drop of the weeping tree's golden resin, hoping its amplifying power could rekindle the ancient spark. But the memory continued to fade, its song growing quieter with each passing hour. The preservation techniques that worked for every other memory, even those scarred by sorrow, had no effect. The painful, humbling truth was dawning on them all. Some memories were simply too old, their original form too fragile to be sustained forever. They were facing the natural entropy of time, a force even their reborn world could not completely defy. In a hushed council, Elara voiced the radical idea that had been forming in her heart. "We cannot restore what time has taken," she said, her gaze sweeping over the worried faces. "But we do not have to let the story die. What if we stop trying to save the original echo and instead create a new one, a collaborative memory, a song and story built by every one of us that interprets and honors the legacy of the first archivist?" The proposal sparked immediate tension. Alaric was the first to object. "That is not preservation," he argued, his voice tight. "That is invention. We would be altering history, replacing a true record with our own collective fiction. The risk of distorting our origins is too great." "But what is the greater distortion?" Elara countered softly. "To hold fast to a perfect, silent relic in a vault, or to let the spirit of that memory live on in the hearts and voices of the community it founded. The original memory may be the truth, but our interpretation, our shared love for it, is also a truth. It is the truth of why it still matters." The stakes were immense. They were weighing the sanctity of a fixed past against the vitality of a living legacy. To proceed was to accept that memory is not a stone, but a river, changing as it flows through time. As the last, faint glimmer of the original seed winked out, leaving behind a dormant, silent husk, the choice was made. There was no original left to protect. There was only the legacy to celebrate. The archivists gathered in a wide circle around the empty alcove. There were no instructions, no single melody to follow. One apprentice, thinking of their own first day, began a soft, tentative hum of wonder. A senior archivist, remembering a lifetime of duty, added a deeper, resonant chord of commitment. Another wove in the rustling melody of a caring hand on a leaf. Lorien did not sing, but he set his emitters to gently pulse in time with the collective heartbeat of the circle, a grounding rhythm for the emerging symphony. Elara closed her eyes and added the thread she felt was most essential, the quiet, unwavering tone of a promise made. Together, their voices and spirits wove a new, living tapestry of sound and feeling. It was not the first archivist's story, note for note. It was their story about the first archivist, a beautiful, multifaceted interpretation born from gratitude and purpose. The new, collaborative memory swelled, a vibrant, evolving song that filled the archive with a different, but no less powerful, light. It settled over the dormant seed, not as a replacement, but as a tribute, ensuring that while the original echo was gone, its meaning would resonate forever, reborn with each new generation that chose to add its own voice to the chorus. The anniversary of the rebirth arrived not as a date on a calendar, but as a palpable shift in the greenhouse's very air. Elara envisioned a celebration that was not a performance for the archive, but a performance by the archive itself. She called it the Symphony of Growth, an event where every archivist, every memory plant, the cave singers, and even the Lumina Warden would contribute their unique voice to a single, harmonious creation. The goal was not a rehearsed piece of music, but a spontaneous, living composition that would resonate through the entire network. The sheer scale of coordination was overwhelming. How do you ask a luminous fungus to harmonize with a crystalline cave singer? How do you blend the logical hum of Lorien's emitters with the raw, emotional song of a senior archivist, recalling a lost season? Minor disharmonies erupted constantly. A group of sun vines, over-enthused, would chime too brightly, their vibrant energy clashing with the deep, mournful hum of the root fungi. A junior archivist, nervous and overthinking, would send a wavering, uncertain note into the collective field that made nearby leaves tremble. Each discordant ripple threatened to unravel the entire tapestry before it could even be woven. Elara and Lorien faced their greatest leadership test. The instinct to control, to conduct and correct each misstep was powerful. Instead, they made a conscious decision to step back. They would not conduct the symphony. They positioned themselves at the heart of the grove, beside the first seed, and became its anchors. Elara focused on holding a single, pure note of invitation and trust, while Lorien maintained a foundational frequency, a bedrock rhythm upon which all other melodies could safely build. They were not directing the music, they were holding the space for it to happen. This act of faith was the ultimate test of their new philosophy. Could a decentralized, collective consciousness truly self-organize into something beautiful, or would it inevitably descend into chaotic noise? The stakes for their entire way of life vibrated in the air. Then, something miraculous began to occur. Sensing the steady anchor provided by their leaders, the community began to self-correct. The sun vines, feeling the root fungi's sorrow, softened their brilliant chime into a warm, supportive glow. The nervous archivist, feeling the unwavering support of the collective frequency, found her confidence, and her note strengthened, weaving seamlessly into the whole. The cave singers added their crystalline, structured lament, which was now met and comforted by the greenhouse's own vibrant, answering song of life. The Lumina Warden did not sing, but became a prism, taking in all the light and sound and refracting it back out as a breathtaking aurora. that danced across the canopy. The symphony swelled into a complexity no single conductor could ever have orchestrated, a living proof that connection could breed its own perfect order. The final, triumphant note hung in the air, a unified vibration that seemed to last forever, and as it slowly faded, the consequences of that profound harmony became visible. All across the greenhouse, on plants that had only ever grown leaves or flowers, new, strange buds began to form. They swelled with light, each one pulsing with a unique, unprecedented resonance. These were not memories of the past, but memories of this very moment, a spontaneous generation of new stories born directly from the collective joy. The archive had just expanded its vocabulary in a single, glorious burst. The air itself buzzed with a new, potent energy, and every archivist, from the oldest master to the youngest novice, felt an unbreakable bond to each other and to the living world they served, their individual voices now forever part of a greater, enduring song. The final, resonant note of the symphony faded, leaving a profound silence that felt not like an absence, but a presence. Elara stepped forward into that sacred quiet, her voice clear and steady as it carried across the gathered community. She did not recite the ancient archivist's promise from memory. Instead, she offered a new version, her words weaving the hard lessons of their journey into a fresh and living vow. We promise, she began, to listen, to nurture, and to grow together with all living memory. As she spoke the final word, 1,000 voices joined hers in perfect unison, the collective affirmation of an entire people. Their unified will flowed into the first seed, which answered with a brilliant, blinding flare of light, a silent, cosmic signature that formally sealed this new covenant between the people and the greenhouse. In that apex of unity, a familiar chill brushed against Elara's heart, the ghost of her old fear, the whisper that she was not quiet enough, not strong enough for this immense responsibility. But this time, she did not fight it. She acknowledged its presence, a scar from her own story, and then let it pass through her like a breath, refusing to let it take root. In that release, she made a private, crucial decision. She would always be a student, even as she stood as a teacher. Her leadership would be a posture of perpetual learning, a constant humility before the infinite wisdom of the world she served. This renewed vow was more than words. It was the spiritual bedrock for their future, transforming their mission from a rigid set of protocols into a living, breathing practice that would evolve with every new sunrise. The brilliant light from the seed slowly softened, settling over the entire assembly as a gentle, affirming warmth. It was a glow that seemed to carry the whisper of endless possibilities and the quiet rustle of stories yet to be born. This continuous, gentle work becomes the new rhythm of the greenhouse, a heartbeat of shared existence. Elara walks the luminous aisles, her hand occasionally brushing a leaf, not to extract a memory, but to share a moment of her own quiet gratitude. She understands now that the archive is not a library to be maintained, but a conversation to be sustained. A memory of a long-forgotten summer rain is enriched when a novice adds their own feeling of cool relief on a warm day, and a chronicle of an ancient storm gains depth when a keeper weaves in their personal understanding of resilience. The stories breathe, they evolve, and in doing so, they remain fiercely, vibrantly alive. This is the final, beautiful truth of their promise. It was never a vow of perfect preservation, but a commitment to perpetual participation. The greenhouse thrives not in spite of change, but because of it, its eternal rustle, a testament to the unending dance between the past and the present, between keeping a story and letting that story live.